You'll never make it in this industry." Those words echoed in Lila Thompson's mind as she stood outside the lavish offices of Hollywood's top film production company. The air smelled faintly of expensive cologne, and the towering buildings around her gleamed with success. Lila, however, felt like an imposter. Clad in a simple gray sweater and worn jeans, she looked nothing like the stylish executives who passed her by without a second glance. Inside the building, the elite world of film production continued without even acknowledging her existence. She wasn't supposed to be here, they thought. She wasn't one of them. A quiet woman with no connections, no extravagant wardrobe, and certainly no credentials to match the high expectations of the film world. But that wasn't her fault. She had the drive, the vision, and most importantly, the passion to create something that would leave a lasting impact. The only problem was, no one was willing to give her a chance. "What are you doing here?" The voice came from behind her, sharp and dismissive. Lila turned to face Richard Wills, the famous film producer who had made a name for himself by turning obscure projects into blockbusters. He eyed her with disdain, his expensive suit a stark contrast to her humble appearance. "I'm here for the audition," Lila replied, keeping her voice steady despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "For the directing position?" Richard raised an eyebrow, clearly amused. "You've got to be kidding. You look like you belong behind the scenes, not in the director's chair." The chuckles from his colleagues did nothing to help her confidence. She felt the weight of their judgment, their eyes scanning her like she was nothing more than a mistake in the wrong place. But she refused to let them see how deeply their words stung. She had been through worse. Much worse. They didn't know her story. They didn't know the years she had spent studying films, analyzing scripts, and honing her craft. They didn't know the countless nights she had spent awake, planning out every detail of the film she had yet to make. They didn't understand the fire that burned inside her, the unshakable belief that she had something to offer this industry. As Richard and his team snickered, Lila turned on her heels and walked out of the office, but not without leaving them with something to remember. They would see her again. She would show them. She would show them all. Walking down the street, her head held high, Lila made a promise to herself. This wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. And someday, she would make sure that Richard Wills and every single person who doubted her would have no choice but to admit they were wrong. No one would ignore her then. She would rise above their judgment, and they would be the ones left in awe. The weeks passed by in a blur of determination for Lila. She didn't let the sting of Richard Wills' words hold her back. Instead, she threw herself into her work, creating a film that would prove her worth. She rented a small, inexpensive apartment downtown and spent every waking moment writing scripts, planning shots, and learning everything she could about directing. She would watch movies late into the night, analyzing every frame, every angle, every actor's movement. She studied the greats, but also the underdogs, those who had fought their way up from nothing to make their mark on the world. Lila was no different. She knew that to make her film stand out, it had to be unique. It had to show the world that she wasn't just another aspiring director. She was a visionary. It wasn't easy. The budget was tight, and she didn't have the resources that larger studios had. But Lila had something they didn't, an unwavering passion to prove herself. She reached out to every filmmaker she knew, asking for help with casting, location scouting, and crew members. Some agreed, others laughed at her, dismissing her as another dreamer. But she refused to back down. She spent weeks rehearsing with her actors, perfecting every line, every scene. She made countless trips to thrift stores and secondhand shops to find the right costumes, and she spent hours setting up lighting and camera equipment in her tiny studio apartment. Every dollar she had went into the production, and every minute of her day was spent making her dream a reality. Finally, after months of hard work, the film was ready. Lila had poured her heart and soul into it, and now it was time to show the world what she could do. She rented out a small theater for the premiere, inviting only a handful of people, those who had helped her along the way. She wasn't expecting a big turnout, but it didn't matter. What mattered was that the film was finished, and it was hers. The lights dimmed, and the first few scenes played. Lila sat nervously in the back of the theater, watching the faces of her small audience as the story unfolded on the screen. She could hear the gasps and murmurs from the crowd as they reacted to the unexpected twists and turns in the plot. As the credits rolled, Lila held her breath, waiting for the verdict. Then, something incredible happened. The audience stood up, applauding. Some even cheered. Lila couldn't believe it. She had done it. She had created something that moved people, something that left an impact. It was the moment she had worked for, the moment she had dreamed of. But this was just the beginning. She knew that she had to take the next step, and that meant reaching out to the people who could change her life. She sent copies of the film to agents, producers, and film festivals, hoping for the break she had been waiting for. It wasn't long before she received a call, one that would change everything. The voice on the other end of the phone was familiar. It was Richard Wills. "Lila," he said, his tone different from the dismissive one she had remembered. "I saw your film, and I have to admit, I was wrong." The phone call with Richard Wills was brief, but impactful. "I want to offer you a meeting," he had said, his voice serious but tinged with an edge of respect Lila had never heard before. "We need to talk about your future in this industry." For a moment, she was stunned. She had always dreamed of this moment, of Richard Wills acknowledging her talent, but hearing it in reality was another thing entirely. The next day, she found herself sitting across from him in his sleek office, the walls lined with accolades and prestigious awards. Richard leaned back in his chair, a stark contrast to the man who had once dismissed her as nothing more than a hopeful dreamer. "I've seen your film," he began, looking at her intently. "And I have to admit, it's impressive. You've got something rare. A vision." Lila fought to keep the smile from creeping across her face. This was what she had worked for, what she had fought against, and now it was all coming to fruition. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady, though inside she was jumping with excitement. "I appreciate your honesty. I put everything into that film. It's not just about the story. It's about showing that someone like me, someone who doesn't come from privilege, can create something worth watching." Richard nodded, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if considering her words. "You've proven that," he said. "But now, we need to talk about the next step. I want you to direct a feature film under my production company." Lila blinked, her heart racing. This was it, the chance she had been waiting for. "A full-length film?" she asked, unable to hide the disbelief in her voice. "Yes," Richard said, leaning forward. "I'm offering you this opportunity because I believe you have the talent to back it up. But let me be clear, this won't be easy. We're talking big stakes here. The film industry is ruthless, and you'll have to prove yourself again and again. Are you ready for that?" Lila took a deep breath, her mind racing. She had spent years proving herself to people who would never give her a chance. But now, the opportunity was right in front of her. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm. "I've been ready." Richard smiled slightly, his expression softening. "Good. I'll have my assistant send over the details. We'll start planning the project as soon as possible." As Lila walked out of Richard's office, a wave of disbelief washed over her. She had done it. She had proven herself, and now the industry was ready to listen. But she knew this was only the beginning. She would have to work harder than ever, push herself to new limits, and show the world that she wasn't just a flash in the pan. She was a director. She was a force to be reckoned with. That evening, as Lila sat at her desk, staring at the script for her upcoming project, she couldn't help but reflect on how far she had come. It wasn't just about making a film. It was about breaking through the barriers that had been placed in front of her, about showing the world that talent could come from anywhere, even from someone who had once been ignored. She picked up her pen and began to write. This was her story, and she wasn't going to stop until it was told. Lila's heart raced as the production began. She had signed the contract, but she knew this was just the first step. Now, the real work started. The film she was about to direct would be her chance to prove herself in the most visible way possible. The pressure was immense, and every decision felt like it could make or break her career. She spent sleepless nights going over the script, mapping out every scene, and visualizing every shot. The film set was bustling with activity, and she was in the center of it all, directing the crew with a confidence that surprised even herself. Richard Wills had given her the opportunity, but it was up to her to make it count. She had been a quiet observer for so long, but now she was in charge, calling the shots. She worked alongside the best in the business, seasoned actors, a talented cinematographer, and a crew that had worked on blockbuster hits. The challenge was real, but so was the passion she had for storytelling. Every time a scene was filmed, she felt a rush of excitement. She knew that each take brought her closer to the moment when she would finally show the world what she was capable of. But there were moments of doubt, 2. The first time she walked on a set to direct the lead actor, Ryan Daniels, she felt a flicker of fear. He was a seasoned star, and she was a newcomer, still learning how to balance the technical and creative aspects of filmmaking. Ryan noticed her hesitation. "You're the director," he said, offering a reassuring smile. "You have to trust yourself. We trust you." Those words stuck with her. It wasn't just about the film. It was about how she carried herself, how she made others believe in her vision. Slowly, she grew into her role. The crew began to respect her, the actors started to trust her judgment, and the scenes came together better than she could have imagined. One evening, as the team wrapped up filming for the day, Richard Wills came over to her. "I've been watching you," he said, his voice a mix of admiration and surprise. "You've done something I didn't expect. This is going to be big, Lila." The validation felt good, but Lila knew she couldn't stop now. She had to finish the film. There was still a lot of work to do in post-production, and she was determined to make sure every detail was perfect. She spent weeks reviewing the final cuts, adding the music that would bring the story to life, and ensuring that every frame felt like it belonged. When the film was finally ready for its premiere, Lila felt a mixture of excitement and nerves. She had spent so much time making this film, and now it was time for the world to see it. The theater was filled with industry professionals, critics, and even some of the people who had doubted her at the start. As the lights dimmed and the film began to play, Lila sat in the back, holding her breath. The film unfolded with unexpected depth, moving the audience in ways she hadn't anticipated. By the end, the room was silent. Then, the applause began. It started slowly, but quickly built to a thunderous ovation. Lila's heart soared. She had done it. She had created something that resonated with people, something that left an impact. The standing ovation was her moment of triumph, but it wasn't just about the applause. It was about proving to herself and to the industry that she was here to stay. Lila's film had done more than just impress. It had set the industry on fire. Critics praised it for its innovative storytelling, its raw emotion, and its ability to connect with the audience on a level most films didn't even attempt to reach. The applause at the premiere had only been the beginning. Offers started pouring in, and soon, Lila was being approached by several major production companies. Richard Wills, who had once been skeptical, now called her every day to discuss potential projects. He had been right. This was going to be big. But as the offers grew, so did the pressure. Lila found herself at a crossroads. She had always dreamed of making a mark in Hollywood, but now that she had the chance, she realized it wasn't as simple as she had once imagined. She had to navigate the politics of the industry, the egos of powerful people, and the constant scrutiny of the public eye. Every decision felt heavier than the last. She spent countless hours in meetings, listening to people who thought they knew what was best for her career. They told her to compromise, to change the direction of her next film to fit a certain mold, to play it safe. But Lila wasn't interested in playing it safe. She had fought too hard to get here to let anyone dictate her vision. One afternoon, as she sat in her office, reviewing scripts for her next project, her phone rang. It was Richard. "Lila, I've been thinking," he began, his tone cautious. "There's a huge opportunity for you in this next film. It's a commercial hit, guaranteed. But it's a big studio project. They'll want to control everything. The script, the actors, the direction. It could change everything for you. Think about it." Lila sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She had always wanted to work with the big studios, but at what cost? She had built her reputation on doing things her way, taking risks and telling stories that mattered to her, not the bottom line. "I appreciate the opportunity, Richard," she replied, her voice steady. "But I can't let anyone take away my creative freedom. I need to make a film that is true to me, not just something that will make money." Richard paused, a long silence hanging between them. When he finally spoke, there was a hint of admiration in his voice. "I get it, Lila. I really do. You're a filmmaker, not a product. And that's why I respect you. You've got the guts to follow your own path. I'll support you whatever you choose." Lila smiled, feeling a surge of gratitude. She had come so far, and now she realized that success wasn't just about the recognition or the offers. It was about staying true to herself. She wasn't going to let the industry change her. That night, she sat down at her desk, a blank page in front of her. It was time to write her next film. This one would be hers, completely. The story would come from her heart, from her own experiences. No compromises, no concessions. She was done trying to fit into a mold that didn't suit her. Lila Thompson was here to stay, and the world was about to see exactly what she could do. She picked up her pen and began to write. Lila's decision to stay true to her creative vision had changed everything. As she sat down to write the script for her next film, the weight of the past few months pressed heavily on her shoulders, but it didn't overwhelm her. It fueled her. She wrote for days, her fingers moving swiftly over the keys, as the story poured from her heart onto the page. It wasn't just a film, it was a declaration. A declaration of independence, of artistry, of authenticity. She knew this was going to be her breakthrough. This was the project that would cement her place in the industry. There were still challenges ahead, but they felt less daunting now. She had learned to trust herself, to believe in her vision even when no one else did. Her office had become her sanctuary. The walls were lined with storyboards, notes, and inspirational quotes, all reminders of how far she had come. But it wasn't just the work she was doing that mattered. It was the impact it would have. She knew this film would resonate with people, not because it was designed to be a commercial success, but because it was real. It would speak to anyone who had ever felt overlooked, anyone who had ever been told they weren't enough. The industry had ignored her for years, but now, it would have to listen. As she reached the final pages of her script, Lila took a moment to reflect. She had started this journey as a quiet woman, with nothing but a dream and a camera. Now, she was a director with a voice, with a story to tell, and the world was ready to hear it. The day she finished the script, Lila called Richard Wills. She was ready. The film was ready. "Richard," she said when he picked up the phone. "It's done. I've written it. This is the one." "I knew you'd do it," Richard replied, a hint of pride in his voice. "You've proven everyone wrong, Lila. Now, let's make sure the world sees it." The excitement in her chest swelled as she hung up the phone. This was the moment she had been working toward. There would be no more compromises, no more doubts. This was her film, her story, and she would see it through. As the production began, Lila stood on set with a newfound confidence. The crew respected her, the actors trusted her, and she knew her vision would be realized. It wasn't just about making a film anymore. It was about creating something that would change perceptions, something that would inspire others to chase their dreams, no matter how impossible they seemed. The film's premiere was a few months away, and Lila couldn't wait to see how the world would react. But in that moment, she realized that it didn't matter. She had already won. She had proven to herself, and to everyone else, that she was more than capable of making it in this industry. She had made her mark, and nothing could take that away from her. Lila stood backstage, her heart pounding in her chest. The premiere of her film was about to begin, and the weight of everything she had worked for pressed down on her. The theater was packed with industry heavyweights, critics, and celebrities, all waiting to see what the quiet woman had created. She had been the underdog for so long, but now, in this moment, she was ready to show the world that she was more than just a dreamer. She was a force to be reckoned with. The lights dimmed, and Lila took a deep breath, walking to her seat in the back of the theater. The sound of the audience settling down faded as the first frames of her film appeared on the screen. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her. The room was silent, as if the entire audience was holding their breath. As the film unfolded, Lila's mind raced. She watched the story she had created come to life, each frame a reflection of her vision, her hard work, and her unwavering belief in herself. The characters on screen were her, in a way, her struggles, her triumphs, her voice. It was everything she had always wanted to say, wrapped up in a narrative that spoke louder than words ever could. The audience was captivated. Lila could hear the soft gasps, the laughter, the quiet moments of reflection. It was exactly what she had hoped for. The film wasn't just entertaining, it was touching hearts, changing minds. By the time the credits rolled, the room was still, almost as if in reverence. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, the applause began. At first, it was hesitant, unsure, but then it grew louder, more passionate, until the entire theater was on its feet. Lila could hardly believe what was happening. She had done it. She had created something that moved people. The standing ovation felt like a dream. She had earned it, but the reality of it still took her breath away. Richard Wills was at the front of the theater, clapping with the rest of the crowd. When he caught her eye, he gave her a nod of approval, a silent acknowledgement that she had proven herself. Lila smiled, but her thoughts were elsewhere. This was only the beginning. She had fought for this moment, but now she had to keep fighting. There would be more projects, more battles, more challenges ahead, but she was ready for them. She had already faced the hardest part, the self-doubt, the fear of failure, the belief that she wasn't good enough. But now, there was nothing left to prove. As the applause continued, Lila stood up, feeling a sense of peace she had never known before. She wasn't the quiet woman anymore. She was a director, an artist, someone whose voice would be heard. And she was just getting started. Lila sat in her office the next morning, the echo of the standing ovation still ringing in her ears. The phone calls started coming in, agents, producers, journalists, everyone wanting a piece of her. It was overwhelming, but she knew this was what she had worked for. The industry had taken notice, and now she was part of it. No longer just a hopeful filmmaker, but a name to remember. She answered calls, scheduled meetings, and tried to process everything happening so quickly. But through it all, one thought stayed with her. This success was just the beginning. There was still so much to do, so much more she wanted to say with her films. Her second project, a story that had been sitting in her mind for years, was already starting to take shape. It would be bigger, bolder, and even more personal than the first. The first film had been about proving she belonged, but the next one would be about making her voice heard. The phone buzzed again, pulling her back to reality. It was Richard Wills. Lila, I just spoke with a few of the major studios. They want to work with you. You've got a real shot at the big leagues now. But listen, it's going to be a whole different world. Bigger budgets, bigger egos, bigger expectations. Are you ready for that? His words were measured, cautious, but Lila could hear the pride in his voice. I've been ready for this my whole life, she replied, her voice steady. But I won't let them change what I stand for. I won't compromise. Richard chuckled. I didn't think you would. That's why I'm backing you, Lila. You've got what it takes. Just don't lose sight of what made you great. The conversation ended, but Lila couldn't shake the feeling that this was the moment everything could go one of two ways. She could play it safe and make films that would please the industry, or she could continue to make films that mattered to her, that spoke the truth she had always believed in. She chose the latter. Days turned into weeks as Lila dove deeper into her second film. She took more risks this time, playing with narrative structure and experimenting with visuals that reflected the rawness of the story. She was no longer concerned about fitting in. This was her chance to redefine what a film could be, what a filmmaker could be. As she worked tirelessly, she began to hear more and more whispers in the industry. Her name was becoming synonymous with innovation, with a fresh voice in an otherwise formulaic landscape. Yet, there were still those who doubted her. She's a one-hit wonder, they said. She'll burn out soon. But Lila didn't let the doubters affect her. She had proven herself once, and she would do it again. She wasn't going anywhere. As her second film neared completion, Lila stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection. She had come so far, but she knew the hardest part was still ahead. The world had seen her work, but she still had to prove that she could keep creating, keep pushing. Boundaries. She wasn't just a director. She was an artist, and artists didn't stop. They didn't rest on their laurels. They kept creating. And that was exactly what she intended to do. Lila sat in the darkened theater, her second film now complete, the final cut playing on the screen in front of her. She had pushed herself further with this one, testing boundaries, taking risks she had never considered before. Every decision felt right. Yet, as the film unfolded, she couldn't help but feel the weight of the moment. The stakes were higher this time. She had proven herself once, but now she needed to show the world that it wasn't a fluke. This film had to be a statement. As the closing credits rolled, the theater remained silent for what felt like an eternity. Then, one by one, people began to stand, their applause building slowly at first, but quickly growing into a deafening roar. It was the validation she had been waiting for, the confirmation that her voice as a filmmaker had a place in this industry. She felt tears well up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away, not wanting to show the vulnerability she had worked so hard to conceal. As the crowd continued to cheer, Richard Wills walked toward her, a look of admiration on his face. You did it again, he said, his voice filled with pride. This one's even better than the first. You've completely changed the game. Lila smiled, but her thoughts were already elsewhere. She wasn't going to rest on her laurels. There was more work to be done, more stories to tell, more barriers to break. As the applause continued, Lila realized that the journey she had started was far from over. This was just the beginning. She had proven that a quiet woman could make her mark on an industry that had long ignored her. Now, she had to keep proving it, one film at a time. Lila stood, her heart still racing, but a sense of calm settling over her. She had made it. But in that moment, she knew that she had just scratched the surface of what she was capable of. The world had seen her talent, but now it was time for her to show them how much more she could do. She wasn't just a director anymore. She was an artist, a storyteller, someone who would never stop creating. And as the lights came up in the theater, Lila walked toward the stage, ready for whatever came next.